Good evening and welcome to this BBC News special. At least 1,000 people are feared dead after the biggest earthquake ever recorded in Japan. It measured a massive 8.9 and struck in the middle of the afternoon, a busy time of day when millions of people all over Japan were in their offices, at home or at school, oblivious to what was about to strike. The tremor lasted for a full 2 minutes. Tokyo was badly shaken, but the worst hit area was Sendai in northern Japan, near the epicenter, a coastal city home to more than 1 million people. The quake unleashed a ferocious tsunami. The waves were up to 10 meters high. That's the size of a 3-story house, and they bore down on the coastline, sweeping everything away in their path. It's feared most of those who died today drowned. We'll be getting the latest from Tokyo live in a moment, but first, Robert Hall reports on the worst earthquake in Japan's history.
And it looks like the tsunami has engulfed several cities.
Terrifying, unstoppable.
Live footage of Miyagi as the tsunami has struck the area.
Along miles of Japanese coastline, the sea is claiming the land. Cars.
As of 7 p.m., the full extent of the damage is still not known.
Ships. Buildings seized by a wall of water, which is sweeping away everything in its path. The tsunami raged through towns and villages. Now choked with debris and smashed homes.
It's a 7 on the Japanese seismic scale of 0 to 7. That is the same size.
Some of the buildings were on fire. No one yet knows the human cost of the tsunami's passing.
Fires breaking out, as you can see, live coverage in the Sendai area, Miyagi Prefecture.
Across farmland, tearing away crops, machinery and livelihoods.
A major earthquake hit Japan Friday afternoon about an hour and 10 minutes ago.
And amongst the terminals of a regional airport.
Japan's meteorological agency says the quake measured magnitude 8.4. It has revised it upwards to 8.4.
Before turning, spent, for the ocean once more. The earthquake had struck at 2:46 on a spring afternoon. Violent tremors shaking communities along 1,300 miles of Japan's eastern seaboard. This is central Sendai, the city closest to the epicenter. Outside the local TV station, disbelief has turned to a realization that the buildings and those around them are in danger. A country more prepared than most for the risk of earthquakes was facing one of the largest on record. Those who fled to safety were experiencing the effects of a seismic shock 8,000 times stronger than the quake which struck Christchurch in New Zealand. In Tokyo, hundreds of miles from the epicenter, Japan's Prime Minister was addressing Parliament when tremors shook the chamber.
I offer my deepest sympathy to the people who have suffered the disaster. An emergency disaster response headquarters has been set up with myself as the head.
By dusk, fires were still raging as a massive rescue effort widened across affected regions. Initial reports spoke of hundreds dead in Sendai alone, with hundreds more missing.
아오모리현 일본의 연안.
Transport and power supplies are severely disrupted. 4 nuclear power stations shut down automatically. One has reported a small radiation leak. Hour by hour, extraordinary pictures have reached millions via Japan's TV networks and the internet. A ship trapped in a giant whirlpool as the retreating tsunami met the incoming tide. A householder desperately trying to alert rescuers. And travellers fleeing for their lives as the flood swept towards them.
We're on the 3rd floor, so we felt quite a big shake, and then everybody was evacuated. And I work in the downtown area of the city, so most people were evacuated and just on the streets, and all the electricity and gas and water had been turned off.
And in Sendai City, tsunami reached 10 kilometers from the coast.
Tsunami warnings have now been issued for the entire Pacific basin, but so far damage elsewhere has been far less severe. A series of secondary shocks have kept Japan on high alert. The latest death toll is put at more than 1,000. This is expected to be a conservative estimate. 1 train is missing, another derailed. A ship carrying 100 people has been swept away.
His mother is also in serious.
Rescue teams from 45 countries are now on standby as Japan begins to assess the full effects of a catastrophe which will test its preparations and its national resolve to the limits. Robert Hall, BBC News.
Well, Japan is no stranger to earthquakes, but as you saw, this really was an extraordinary one. Our science correspondent Palab Ghosh is here. Just let's talk first of all about this nuclear reactor. It sounds like there is a pretty worrying situation going on there.
It could be worrying. The situation is that we have a nuclear reactor where the pressure is building up because there's a problem with the cooling system. The authorities want to relieve that pressure by venting steam from the cooling system. The problem is that that steam could be radioactive. The Japanese nuclear authorities are playing the situation down, saying that if it is radioactive, it's probably only slightly radioactive. It poses no risk to human health or the environment, but we will have to wait and see if that really is the case.
And in terms of the earthquakes themselves, Japan has, what, hundreds every year?
Well, that's right. The entire Pacific Rim region is known as the Ring of Fire. And this illustration will show you. It just shows that red line shows where the Earth's tectonic plates meet. And when they rub up against each other, you get volcanic activity and, of course, earthquakes. Now, let's just zoom in towards Japan. And what you'll see is that that region has even more tectonic plates than normal. Lots of them rubbing up against each other, which is why, as you say, there are hundreds of earthquakes each year, but many of them barely register. But on this occasion, there was a sudden large jolt, which led to the country having its largest earthquake ever.
And it seems that the tsunami is what has done the most destruction. Most people who have died are feared to have drowned.
Well, that's right. Now, the tsunami is caused when these plates actually connect together. One slips underneath the other, and that raises the seabed up. That in turn raises the water up, we can see from this illustration, and that results in a giant tidal wave that we call a tsunami. It's different from a normal wave in that it travels so fast, nearly 500 miles an hour, until it hits land, and then it can rise up even further. As you said, 3 stories high, that high, and it can, as we've seen in Robert Hall's report, it can surge well into the land for several miles, causing huge devastation. There have never been pictures that have been captured quite like it in the moment.
And what have seismologists been saying about it?
Well, seismologists have been relieved that the tsunami hasn't spread to other parts of the world. This giant tidal wave has spread all across the world, and the worry was that we'd get a repeat of what happened in 2004. That's not happened, and they've said that they're relieved that that's the case.
The fault has broken along a line hundreds of kilometres long, tens of kilometres wide, and all that amount of land has suddenly moved by several metres. That's an enormous amount of movement. It's an enormous amount of energy.
That was a huge amount of energy that's been released. At the moment, it's caused great devastation in Japan. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to have caused the same devastation that we'd been expecting in other parts of the world.
OK, Palab Ghosh.